Signed a record deal when I was 18 years old.
Wow.
I was just finishing my A-levels, ready to go to university. The glitz and glam of the music industry came, and it didn't last as long as, maybe we hoped it would. We went out, we got to tour, we got to meet our heroes. We had a top 10 single in the UK. Just that evening, I was just sat there Googling away. How does it work?
Yeah.
What happens? And what I found was articles and forums about broken industry, broken this and that and the other. And it wasn't that it was broken, it was just that it needed to be fixed. And that kind of set me on the mission.
And today we've got Ryan here from Audoo.
Our first pilot in the UK in April of 20. And I'll never forget sending that email, to the guys at PRS final week of March, just saying, I hope you're okay. We'll be in touch in 6 months. And that was it. And kind of almost sat at home going, oh my God, what do I do?
Welcome to Founder Metrics by Vested, the podcast where we dive into the world of hotshot business leaders and the specific metrics, not just the usual KPIs, that drive their game-changing companies forward. I'm your host, Ifti Nasser, CEO and founder of Vested, and I'm excited to take you on this journey with me into the world of successful founders. Hi, I'm Ifti, and this is Founder Metrics. And today we've got Ryan here from Audoo. Ryan, brilliant to have you in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to give us a little bit of a background to Audoo? Because it's an amazing story.
Of course, yeah. So we're a technology company, and we're solving the bridge between data and music. So and specifically in an area that's known as public performance.
Yeah.
So this is wherever you hear music when you're out and about, in cafes, gyms, retail locations, restaurants. What's happened for many years is the way that they've collected that data has been quite manual. It's been surveys. Somebody sat there with a clipboard taking a random survey, or they've factored kind of popular radio play and chart metrics where, what happens in the real world versus what happens, kind of on the charts or in a very, very small statistical sample is kind of really, really far apart. So we created a device called an audio meter, which goes in, tracks the music that's played, and then it reports it all back to the rights organisations.
Goes in where?
So goes into just a single socket in any of these kind of retail, gym, fitness locations, anywhere that you would hear music out and about.
Right. And do they is it a voluntary thing? Just going back to the whole notion that if you're trying to stop people from not paying the due rights.
So there's two sides. There's if you are a public location and you're playing music, you need to pay what's known as a music license. So in the UK here, you'll have heard of PRS and PPL, and it's a little bit like TV licensing. So at the home, you have a TV license. In a commercial premises, you have to have a music license. Right now, we're doing it on a kind of voluntary basis with the rights organisations because it's early stage. So there's a lot to get to. Over time, we think it will start to become a condition of the license, and we kind of liken it a little bit to like a smart meter in energy. You have electricity and gas, therefore you need a meter to track it, and exactly the same in
music, you need a meter to track
exactly.
it. So do you want to tell us where it came from? Because I think you started life as a musician, didn't you?
I did. So signed a record deal when I was 18 years old.
Wow.
I was just finishing my A-levels, ready to go to university, and the glitz and glam of the music industry came, and it didn't last as long as maybe we hoped it would. But with so many of those stories, we went out, we got to tour, we got to meet our heroes. We had a top 10 single in the UK, and then it all came crashing down.
You remind everybody it is, so just in case you get it back to number one.
I still joke. I think my mum bought all the copies. So the song was called Domino Effect. We're a band called The Lions. We're from Wolverhampton. And actually I've spent kind of the last 18 years in technology and data businesses. And a few years ago, basically heard my song in a really, really popular department store in London and went, wonder how it works that I'm getting paid. And my wife was definitely looking for an expensive handbag that day. So, kind of things were going on in my head. And actually just that evening, I just sat there Googling away, how does it work? Yeah. What happens? And what I found was articles and forums about, quite negative, broken industry, broken this and that and the other. And it wasn't that it was broken. It was just that it needed to be fixed really from a technology first perspective. And that kind of set me on the mission then to go, okay, how do I create something? And, we've seen technologies like Shazam and that. And it was kind of, the joke was almost, how do I build Shazam into a box that is like privacy first, and almost just once it's in, it's completely forgotten. It just ticks over in the background and that's it.
Fantastic. So how many locations do you think you are present in today?
So I can't tell you because each one's slightly different,
Right.
but we are currently in 11 countries around the world. So as far afield as Australia and New Zealand, we've got multiple across Europe, the Middle East, and the UK as well. And
But
growing.
roughly how many?
It's a lot. It's a lot and growing. So yeah, we're providing millions and millions of lines of data every single week, which
That is
great.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's going to be lots of other stuff that you'll get to do with that
Definitely.
data in due course as well.
Yeah,
I guess
absolutely.
that's yet another story. But coming back to Audoo, I mean, even the funding story behind Audoo is quite amazing itself.
Yeah.
So, how did you start in terms of the funding behind the?
So typical, UK business story of applied for my SEIS, Advanced Assurance, got it with, a really bad deck when I look back at it and some very, very basic numbers. And I went to 10 friends and family and said to each of them, will you invest £10,000 each? And 7 of them said yes. So the 3 that didn't, probably really kicking themselves now. But yeah, and that was it. So and some of them did a little more than 10,000. So so kind of got to that magic £100,000 mark, and that gave me something to go to a development house. I'd done a little bit of prototyping myself, like. It's that joke. If our tech team was here and I said, I can develop, they'd laugh me out of the room. But I can do some basic code. So kind of played and built that first iteration. Went to a development house and said, hey, I need some help with this. I haven't got a huge amount of money, but this is what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to get to. Can we get to a stable prototype? And that was kind of it. So we did that over a 6-7 month period.
Right.
And it was a bit of cash and a bit of equity split within there as well, which worked really well.
Given my given what Vested do, I mean, it's interesting. How did you solve that cash and equity conversation?
So at the time, just because it was easier and they, of course, were a limited company, what we did is I paid them and then they just reinvested it back into the business. So to give me that kind of cash flow. So so would have preferred to have done options, but it was almost too early to even figure that out. And I think I was still on model articles at the time as well. So and actually built that first prototype. And when it was kind of fully working, fully stable, did that cheeky thing that I think all founders would do is go, okay, who am I going to get to? How am I going to shoot my shot? And I messaged on LinkedIn the chairman of PRS, which is the UK's largest society. And it was one of those, hi, you don't know me, but I've got something I think can help. Could I buy you a coffee and grab 20 minutes of your time?
Bold, very bold.
Yeah, completely. And bless him, he wrote back and said, come see me. And I got nearly 2 hours of his time, and he said to me right at the end, he said, look, he said, if you can scale this and this is really stable and really works, he said, everybody's going to need this. He said, let me connect you with the team this end. Let me just give you a point in, in the right direction to meet some people. And he was true to his word. And it's quite funny because that would have been nearly 5 years ago.
I was going to say, what was the date of that?
Yeah,
so we can time it to where we are today.
Yeah, so that would have been back end of 2019.
Wow.
And it's funny because this time last year, after 27 years on the PRS board, and I think about 8 as the PRS chairman, he joined us as our chairman, which is great. So because I think he could see it. He could see the value that we're adding around the world. He'd been there a long time, and he just said, "Look, I think I can really, really help you on this." And that's it. And he's just a real trusted figure in the industry. So it's great.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, these guys have so many opportunities and so much experience to deploy. It's a challenge for them deciding where they put their time, because that's the most valuable thing, and to have got that, I think, is fantastic, Ryan.
Yeah, I think I always say, we're a really hard-working team and hard-working business, and I think he saw hopefully a tenacity and a hunger for it, and he saw a team that really wanted to innovate, and actually everything worked. Everywhere we went, so we deployed kind of our first commercial pilot in Australia during COVID. So to deploy hardware on the opposite side of the world, when you can't legally leave your home at the time. And I think even that, people like Nigel were looking and going, oh my God, how are they doing this? And
it shows a level of determination, a massive amount of determination. And I guess, adaptability.
Absolutely. So yeah, always.
So that 100K
Yeah.
got you how far?
Yeah, not too far. So probably for that first 6 or 7 months, I continued to work part-time and consult at that time as well, just to make sure we could survive and eat at the end of the month as well. And then I launched into a seed round. So with that prototype, I went and got a letter of intent from one of the societies, was able then to go out to further investors and say, look, I've done it. It works. Yes, it needs to be more scalable and a bit, better. But actually, I've got a customer that wants it, and we're talking to others, and they're saying they have the same problem. So, kind of with those kind of 2 bits, I was able to go and I raised a seed round of £1.2 million.
1.2 million. How? Tell me a little bit more about that and the journey and the people on that one.
So I would always say that for me was probably our most brutal round, because it's a seed round. You're taking investments of anything from kind of 10 to 50,000. So it was a lot of volume of meetings. It was people who, it was their own money. They were looking for tax relief, be it EIS.
Yeah.
And I always joke it was the investors who are a little bit more Dragon's Den, who'd sit there and, kind of really try and grill you. Not that they didn't know the subject, but they were kind of...
Well, they probably didn't.
No, and they were it was sometimes trying to be a little bit over clever. There were multiple, there were 2 or 3... because of course I didn't have an office at the time, so you'd meet them in a coffee shop or you'd meet them somewhere, say, hey, no, it's cool, I can come to you. I actually walked out. I just said to them, look, because they were either rude or aggressive, and I just said, look, as much as I need this, it's just not going to be right. This is not the relationship that we want. So yeah, it took me about 2.5, maybe 3 months. Used a brilliant introducers network as well, who really, really helped. Who could go actually.
Who was that? It might be useful.
Yes, it was a business called Audoo, and they were just great because not only did they introduce people, they do it in a really soft way. They do it for events where you happen to be sat to somebody who's really into music or really strategic.
Yeah.
So so I met Paul Kemp, who runs Tileyard, where we are today, through that. They just helped drive and keep up the momentum and the pace on it and do that as well, which was great. But yeah, it was a tough old round that was. So because I think there was
date
so
again?
much. So that would have been back end of 2019, going into early 20. So,
right, early 20. First one was 2019.
Yeah.
So and then the journey started to change. What happened?
Yeah, so we were due to launch our first pilot in the UK in April of 20. And I'll never forget sending that email, final week of March, just saying, to the guys at PRS, I hope you're okay, just like we'll be in touch in 6 months. And that was it. And kind of almost sat at home going, oh my God, what do I do?
So you went into COVID with how many people?
3.
And you came out of COVID with?
25. It's just a lot, yeah.
That's quite an amazing transition. So were they all virtual hires through Zoom, for want of a better phrase?
Literally. So, I employed people in Australia via Zoom. We employed people dotted around the UK. So I think it grew the opportunity of the talent pool massively. It meant we had to figure out a way to communicate constantly. So, we're a business that lives for Slack. We communicate and we drive that wherever we are in the world as well. And it just gave us a way of a really good, flexible culture. And actually, as we were coming out of COVID, which, truly was kind of back end of 22, maybe even early 23. I got people who'd worked for us for 18 months and never met. So
that is quite incredible. But I guess going back to that point that you made earlier, we were going to be launching on the other side of the world. It almost became irrelevant, didn't it, during COVID? A video conference, and so long as technology can move across borders, really didn't matter.
No, and that was it. So we finally launched our first commercial pilot a year later in April of 21 in Australia. And the way we did it was, again, power of LinkedIn, power of network. I went out to some of the investors and said, hey, do you know anybody in Australia? Do you know anybody if we could physically ship these devices to? There are only like 10 or 15 of them, and they're going to go and they're going to plug it in. And one of my investors, Glyn, said he had a really successful business in security services, like CCTV and like kind of tagging. Yeah. And he said to me, one of my guys moved to Australia a couple of years back. He's an expert in CCTV fit outs, let's give him a call. And again, jumped on a Zoom, spoke to Rob and said, look, we need some help. Can we literally ship these to your house? And can you plug them in? Because our devices had SIM cards in them. So yes, we knew in theory that the second you plug them in, it was going to hit a mobile network. But it was like, Rob, can you plug them in at home? Can you go and buy a multi-way? Why are you the money? What can you do to check it? And again, they landed, he plugged them in. God, they all worked. And that was it. So you just... It's that typical startup story, in probably the most extreme of times, but you just have to problem solve at every point, right?
But I think that what I've seen myself with so many of the people that we have on Vested is the real entrepreneurs will adapt and adjust based on what reality throws their way.
Yeah,
and
so
you've demonstrated that.
Of course. As I say, we had some time pressure on it as well, because at the end of 20, I raised another round, which at the time we labelled our Series A. We now call it our Series ABBA, and I'll explain why.
No.
No. But it was led by a family office, and it was £5.5 million. And they said to us at the time, so we took the money in the November, and they said, look, we'll give you half now, and you get the other half when you've had a successful pilot and you've got 6 months to do it. And that first tranche of money landed before COVID lockdown too. And it was like, oh my God, of course I rang them the next day completely. And I rang them the next day and I was like, okay, I'm panicking. And they were like, don't panic.
Chill.
They were like, don't worry. They were like, this is the most unique set of environments. And of course, then hit the pilot, was successful within that 6-month window. And I wouldn't say we kept it to ourselves, but it's one of those things, you kind of do it in your own environment and then you come out with the results to your largest, your lead investor. And I remember ringing them and saying, hey, we've done it. They've just sent me an email because we set a bunch of success metrics around accuracy, uptime, etc. And I was like, here's the email from the client saying everything's been hit. This is brilliant. We want to talk about a bigger order. And they were like, but nobody hits this clause. And I was like, they were like, nobody hits it, not alone in the middle of a global pandemic. Like nobody's, we normally go back in and renegotiate and get a little more equity.
That's what was there.
Yeah, they were like, and they say, how the hell did you do that? And I was like, well, we had to, right? I was like, I had a contractual, agreement that I had to hit that and I had to find a way. And I don't think they could believe it.
Well done for testing the agreement.
Completely. So, and actually they've been with me now since back end of 2020. They've been brilliant. They've followed on. We've got a really good working relationship. And I think even they have loved the journey because, there's been so many things that, have been completely out of anybody's control, like pandemics, like upturns in financial markets where you're like, oh, how much more are you going to throw at us? So
but you took it all on.
Exactly.
So to tell me a little bit more about this notion of
Series
ABBA.
so just
I'm a big fan of ABBA, by the way.
Cool, me too. Who isn't? So just as we were closing out this round, I did an interview on BBC News because the story was starting to grow momentum, and I received this incoming email from Bjorn Ulvaeus, and I'll never forget it. And it said, hello Ryan, my name is Bjorn. I saw you on the news. I'm a singer-songwriter. So I'm a songwriter, and I'd love to see if I can help in any way. And I'm like, Bjorn Ulvaeus. And
really, yes.
Without a word of a lie, the first thing I did was I text my WhatsApp group with my best friends and went, right, which one of you has done this? Like, come on. And they're all going genuinely, like, this isn't us.
Don't know.
Like, okay. So I'm like, okay, I'll just reply, hi Bjorn, lovely to meet you. Thank you for the email. Wouldn't it be great if we got on a Zoom in the next few days? And I could tell you a little more. And he came back within minutes. Sure, I'm free Thursday, whatever day it was. And send the invite. We set up the Zoom. And there he is, just sat there. I'm like, I think it's one of those surreal moments, like you've been a fan. Like, I remember dancing to Dancing Queen, with my parents in the kitchen growing up. That was the one. And I think because I've had, since music, you kind of that 18-year gap, I'd worked for Visa, I'd worked in app development, I'd worked for Vodafone, and it's really hard with parents sometimes to explain what you do. So, my team at Visa ran digital analysis for retailers. I remember my dad ringing me once, and he'd been shopping in Marks and Spencer, and he'd seen a Visa
problem
sticker.
with Visa.
No, he'd seen a sticker at the till, and he said, "Oh, is that your team, son?" And I just said, "Yes, Dad." I just went with it. So it was really hard. So to ring my mum and dad and say, I just spoke to Bjorn from ABBA. And right at the end of the call, he said, "Look," he said, "if you ever need any, help on the funding." And I said, "Well, we're just about to close out a round." And he gave me an amount of money. He said, "Look," he said, "I'll invest this," which is hilarious because the round was done. So I had to phone the family office that was investing the large amount of money. And I said, "Look, could I reduce you by X?" And they were like, "Why are you changing the deal?" And I was like, "Well, Bjorn from ABBA," they were like, "Take the money." They were like, "It's cool, we'll reduce, it's all good, this is great."
Having Bjorn on board is well worth it.
Yeah, and that was it. So, and I guess it kind of gave us our first entry point into a megastar really supporting, because I think a lot of people had said to me, well, the megastars must be over-indexing on radio and these kind of traditional methods of how data's being collected. So he could, in theory, earn less, but actually having that support, that kind of backing, really, really changed it. So yeah.
I mean, Series ABBA sounds great, but it seems like you didn't stop there. I mean, you seem to have like a deck of cards, a collection of megastars, and I'm talking about absolutely unbelievable megas. So, and this is Founder Metrics, so it's about trying to get to the source, the soul of what helps you manage and work your business. So lots of people think about, especially once you've got investors on board, the metrics, the things that they're going to be looking at each month, and that's great. So investors will look at certain metrics, and what were they for your investors, although they were unorthodox investors?
No. So the obvious ones is people want to track your revenue. They want to see where you're at every quarter, at the end of every year as well. So we provide really clear updates via kind of a newsletter and that way. The other thing for me was for the team as well. So I'd worked in 2 technology startup businesses before, one in the fintech space, one in the app development space, and had share options in both. But actually it was something that was always hard to understand. It was like, when you joined, it was like, there's your employment agreement, there's your options agreement, sign them, and it is just this thing, right? That's hopefully one day somebody comes in and buys and some money lands in your bank account. But there was no way of tracking it, no way of understanding it, or kind of managing it.
It's quite a complex
it is
space,
right? So and even the difference between EMI and approved, how you're going to run it all and keep it consistent. So it was A, being able to see it, B, being able to service our shareholders in a really succinct way, of, if there's a new valuation recorded outside of sending an email, how did you show share growth? How did you kind of do those things? And actually managing it day to day. So, I have a love-hate relationship with passwords. Just, I use the Mac with the fingerprint, but the amount of times it still just doesn't pick it up. And I always think one of the most difficult things to log into is anything on gov.uk or HMRC. Because there's never a consistent ID. It's, then I've got to go and find this authorization code, etc. So, kind of obviously bringing it into Vested, but I think we've referred 8 businesses to Vested. So I like to think we're a bit of a I know. So I'll give you the list. So, but actually, it just made it easier and succinct, and we weren't having to do admin every day. We could jump in, we could hold it, even down to when I raised the Series ABBA. Family office said to me, "Well, what's your options pool?" They said, "What are you not going to go over? We don't want to just keep diluting and diluting." So the fact we could create a pool and just monitor it, even from a internal process, and even now, we have a quarterly board meeting, and I have to enter that information, and so it's great. So I log in, bang, that's my number. I can just throw that into my board minutes, and that's it. It's done. So it's a really, really good way, kind of day to day, for me to understand the obvious things as a founder: dilution, what percentages people are. You wouldn't believe how many shareholders I get, via WhatsApp on a Thursday at night or Sunday morning saying, hey, I was just telling my wife about the growth. Can you remind me how many shares I have and what the share price is? You're like, oh, like, can you not track it yourself or log in?
Yeah,
but
just log.
Exactly.
You've got the invite to Vested. You can go have a look.
I know, but even that, at least I can just quickly open it on my phone and go, yeah, great, he's got X amount. I know my share price, and I can just quickly reply and send it that way. And it's normally the same handful. You're like, sent you this 6 months ago. You know what the price has moved to, but yeah, it's or look at the notification email.
Well, that's a brilliant ad for Vested. But let's go back to you guys and Audoo.
Yeah.
When so the general metrics that we talked about there are the ones that, as we said, investors are looking for. Yeah. But how was it that you could get a feel for what was really happening in your business? What the founder metrics, things that allowed you to think, things are on track, or actually I need to intervene or get involved?
So I think we've kind of grown the business in kind of a couple of key ways. So first one, obviously revenue, that's you have to grow the business that way to keep growing and bring it that way. Obviously investment shows the market that you're growing, you're doing the right thing. You don't keep raising money without doing, having progress. We've looked at IP development, so where we're developing new IP within the business to go, okay, is there value to that? So we have multiple patents and we have further pending patents as well. And then kind of the final one really is about what we kind of call the global growth. So, I always remember, we fully launched it. So we did that pilot in Australia, then we launched a few months later into a full commercial rollout, and then we did it in a second European market. And I remember one of my investors saying to me, that's it, you've cracked it. I said, you're live in 2 markets, 2 different languages, different parts of the planet. You really, really showing that you have a business that can scale in every market around the world, and that was it. So I think it's kind of pulling all that together and going, okay, does everything seem like we're doing it? So the start of every financial year, when you start a startup, you're kind of like, right, we're not going to be corporate. We're not going to wear suits and ties. We're going to be different. And we always we call it kind of our quadrant of KPIs. And, it's commercial, marketing, technology, and operations. And like each one of those will have 2 or 3 things that they've got to achieve. Commercial is obvious. It's numbers, right? Operations, it's around throughput for our manufacturing, making sure that, that we're, like devices aren't going down in market. Technology is about uptime or something new that we're trying to launch, feature set, etc. So we kind of look at those 4 and go, okay, if kind of double it up to two points per department, and actually if we're hitting those and the board are happy and we're tracking them, we're in a good place as well. And I think the final bit is and what's been really validating for us, so in this nearly 5-year journey now, we've had 3 acquisition offers, most one pretty big as well. And I always think, that's a pretty good indication to go out to shareholders and say, hey, somebody offered. And, the first thing when the approach comes in is it's like, pick up the phone to the board and go, hey, it's weird going, we've got another one at the 3rd one. But actually to get in that room and see people want what you've created is really, really good. And the trick for me I get now is, with the board, particularly the family office, because they're very self-made money as well. So, they've been there and done it as well. Is they're kind of like, not yet. Just breathe. Come on. You can do this more. How many more conversations have you got going on right now, to launch into new markets? Just breathe and you'll go. So, yeah.
So when you think about it, you've gone from an idea through to some trial manufacture, test application, and now you've got all these different parts of the business taking place, whether it's patents, registering, manufacture. Do you feel that it's getting heavy at the moment, or Constantly. Are you feeling a way of actually pulling yourself further and further up?
I think I always say my role really evolved this year. I feel like it was the first time, and I've always had imposter syndrome about being a CEO.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
You called it yourself, right? You're like, right, I started a business. Well, I'm the CEO, and it's a really weird thing to say. And even now, like in a friendship environment, somebody's like, "Oh, he's a CEO," and I'm like, "No, I'm not. I've just had an idea," right? Like it's that. Again, because you grow investment. The senior team in the business are incredible. They are the best at what they do. So that's allowed me to step back, focus more on the investment side, focus more on the kind of, I guess, the external side, even doing things like this, kind of had to shy away from previously because of time management, but also just how did you tell a tangible story and showed kind of what you've been through during that process. So, and we just took on last month, we took on our first US-based employee. So I've now got a business that there is always somebody online, which is, kind of...
It's a bit like the British Empire.
It is, yeah, so it's, I think I said blessing and a curse earlier, but it is, because it means that you're always waking up to things in your inbox or on the Slack channel and things that are moving. But even that has taught me ways of working, because it used to be get online, oh my God, I've got to quickly respond to this just in case I can catch them at the end of their day in Australia or somewhere else. Where now it's like, actually, no, they'll be offline now, or they're about to go offline. You know what? It can go on to today's workload. We can pick it up and do it that way. And again, that remote working helps. It's not like we've all got to suddenly turn up to an office and be there. It means we can work as and when we need to, which is great.
So, the history, the journey that you've been on is actually quite stellar. Yeah. Not just to mention all the stars within your cap table, but where are you going now, Ryan? What's next? What's the next near-term horizon? Where's the vision going to take you?
Yeah, so, I mean, we're beyond where I ever thought it would be, right? And I think that's probably helped, the amount of businesses and startups I've been around, where you're on that early piece because you're at an Audoo event and there's other founders there who I always found completely intimidating, right? Because they were privately educated, or they were from a family of wealth, and you could just see things and you could see an air. And it's really interesting. There was one last year, and I saw him at the Christmas night, and he pretty much started at the same time as me. It's Christmas drinks. I was like, oh, how's it all going? And he was like, yeah, we about to be struck off this week, And I was almost embarrassed going, approaching 30 people, and this is going... And it was really weird because I was so intimidated by this guy. I don't think he was doing it on purpose. I was just...
He just was. And
I was just worlds apart, right, from where we were. So I think because of that, because of how we are, I still don't have a PA to this day. I'm like, no, I'm just going to get things done. Our desire, we've starting the US hire last month. We've got to push into the US pretty hard now as well, and we're picking up momentum there. Europe is heating up, and we're having lots of conversations in Africa. So I'd like to think we'll kind of be at maybe 15 to 16 markets by the end of this year. We can keep growing. I've got this goal, we're edging towards the 100 million valuation, which,
fantastic.
Again,
you hadn't anticipated.
No, I was like, I remember doing that that seed round, the Series Ava, and hitting I think we were 16, 17 million at post that round, and going,
wow,
God, looking at my own vested number, going, wow, So I was like, this is how the Kardashians claim they're a billionaire. Okay, cool. Now I understand. But kind of going through that, and actually just to keep going and keep growing, we're having the time of our life, right? Yeah. We get invited by our heroes to see them on stage and to go to events. We've really started to segment ourselves into the industry because the music industry is not one that particularly invites tech in. We've probably had a really soft landing in, as part of it.
Well, you've had the doors open.
Well, yeah, it does help,
Some very impressive doorkeepers.
So I need one of them to come to some of the meetings and be like, do you want to tell Elton? Do you want to say no to him? But no, I think through that, and I think we're just going to keep growing and keep going. So there was never a jump off point in this. I never. You hear these people say, hey, I'm going to hit this number and then I'm going to go to a PE house and I'm going to sell it. Maybe I should have been better planned than that, but actually I think we're just having fun. We're doing it.
Yeah, and I think that's key to continuing. Yeah. I think there's no reason to just jump off just because you've hit a number. But it was interesting what you just mentioned, and it was almost said with a sense of bravado. I haven't got a PA yet. That's really, really interesting because one of the things for me, and it's something that I've increasingly become more and more aware of, is that there's that time element. There is only a certain amount of time that you have.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to cover all the bases, you're either going to let go of things that should have been addressed by you, that could have been,
It's true.
when are you going to change that mindset? Because it is a big limiting factor.
It's true. The board keep telling me, come on, Ryan, you need to look. I think we'll probably get through this year, see where we get to. I would admit I'm a workaholic. I'm an absolute... actually, one of the best things that happened for me during this journey is my daughter was born as well. So, and that's made me have downtime and kind of made me, because I do think I'd have been working 20+ hour days and I'd been ringing the team all hours every day, and even down to, she started school last year. So understanding the half term and the holidays, I think pre her, I was always looking at it, why do you need a week off with the kids? Just, give them an iPad, let them, just what do you need to do? So I think that's really, really helped and done that. I spent a lot of time, particularly the last 12 to 18 months since the world reopened, traveling, because again, I'd got clients of nearly 2 years that I'd never met, so needed to get on a plane and say, thank you for your business and take them to dinner.
But this is the difference. I mean, you say you're working 20 hours. I'm not sure it's work. No. From everything that you've said so far,
exactly.
You're living your life. You're doing what you're passionate about, and so it's not work from your perspective. No. But there's a limit to how many hours there is. There is a blocker on there, which is the number of hours that you can do doing the things that you most enjoy or most want. It has been an unbelievable journey. I have personally met and certainly talked to many thousands of founders, and that challenge that happens, and a good number of startups don't actually make it through. We all know that, but you certainly seem to have enjoyed the journey.
Definitely.
The absolute most I've heard so far, Ryan. So firstly, thank you for joining us here on Founder Metrics. Thank you for sharing the story and the little nuggets of wisdom. There's a few there that I'm going to be taking away
cool.
as well for myself. So
let me know which ones they were.
I will do, and I'd love to stay connected. I mean, you're using Vested, so that's fantastic. So we'll be connected that way anyway. But thank you again, Ryan.
Anytime.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Founder Metrics. Remember, the biggest of ambitions are within reach when you leverage the right metrics and strategies. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and never miss out on any future ones. And don't forget to visit us on www.vested.com for additional resources, articles, and exclusive content. Join our growing community of entrepreneurs and founders by following us on LinkedIn, Twitter, X, and Instagram. We'd love to hear your thoughts and insights. Together, let's continue to unlock and share the metrics of success and create a brighter future.